Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the virtual workshop of the Behavior Forum. The Behavior Forum is a collaborative platform created by scientists for scientists and for everyone else who is interested in animal behavior. This is how the Behavior Forum looks like. And after registration, you have the chance to ask questions or answer to questions. You can get information about interesting events, meetings, trainings, or job opportunities. You can get information about guides and protocols or provide them. So the Behavior Forum is a great chance to get together, to discuss, and to support each other. We are regularly organizing these virtual workshops, always at Thursdays at 12:30. And you can apply or suggest speakers at the Behavior Forum. And there you can also get information about past and future virtual workshops. And before these workshops, you have the chance to ask questions direct to the speaker and interact with the speakers. And also today and for all other talks, during the talks and after the talks, you also have the chance to ask questions and to discuss and speak with the speaker and discuss about animal behavior.
Thank you, Pia. And so today we're here to listen to our host, Igor Branchi, who is a researcher, a director, and a group leader at the Center for Behavioral Sciences and Mental Health at the Italian Institute of Health in Rome, Italy. And when we asked him what was the main research interest he has, he told us that it is really in the application of an integrative approach to investigate the biological basis of psychiatric disorders, but also of adapted therapeutic strategies. He is also interested in complexity science and philosophical consideration on the effectiveness of scientific approaches. And I think you can already feel that from the very exciting and a bit provocative title of his talk today. Through these original lenses, he aims at understanding the central nervous system, but also bridging brain and behavior processes. He's very well known for his conceptualization of the interplay between plasticity, contextual factors, and mental health, and the more recent development of network-based strategies to operationalize plasticity. Complementing his preclinical work, he is also conducting clinical investigations aimed at exploring the efficacy of treatments and conditions affecting plasticity, all that in relation to the quality of living of actual patients. So in the talk of today, Igor is going to argue for the need to recenter neuroscience on behavior through different aspects, to different avenues. And without further ado, I will now leave the floor to you, Igor, and you can share your slides.
So I will stop with the sharing so you can start to share.
Okay. I share my slides. Can you see my presentation? In presentation mode? Oh,
yes.
Okay. Great. So first of all, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to give a talk at the Behavior Forum. So I want to start by thanking the Behavior Forum, and in particular, I would like to thank Marion, Pia, and Fotali for hosting me. I'm very happy to give this talk here because I am proudly I have probably a background in behavioral biology, and my personal journey was to start as a behavioral biologist and etologist, and then move to neuroscience in order find explanation for behaviors. And then with my own personal experience with neuroscience, get a little bit disappointed by neuroscience, and then moved back to behavioral biology in a complexity perspective. So in some way, what I will discuss today it's a summary of this journey. So I would like to start by I move this here so I see the screen. Okay, and I will start by talking about reductionism. Why reductionism? Because reductionism is has been and still is nowadays the most commonly used theoretical approach to understand life sciences overall. And reductionism, it's when we have a phenomenon that develops at different scales. Reductionism, it's simply by identifying scales that are more macro scales and scales that are more micro scales. It's explaining a macro manifestation such as behavior with a micro event such as a gene modification. And this approach, reductionism, has been impressively successful. We, because of reductionism, could develop vaccines, antibiotics that are among the most important drugs we have. We could understand the monogenic disorders. So reductionism has been highly productive and will go on being highly productive. However, reductionism, when dealing with complexity, is lagging behind. And a telling example, for instance, is our capacity of developing new molecular entities. And molecular entities are the ingredients that are in drugs in order to produce a therapeutic effect. You see that for the same amount of money, 1 billion euros, spent for research and development, we could develop around 70 new molecular entities at mid last century. But nowadays, our capability to identify new effective molecular entities, it's dramatically reduced. With the same amount of money adjusted for inflation, we can get less than one new molecular entity. And this despite our knowledge of our understanding of biomedical processes has dramatically increased. So it means this suggests that maybe it's not a problem of amount of knowledge, but it's a problem of conceptual approach. Another telling example about the potential limits of reductionism comes from this worm, Semnorhabditis elegans, that is a laboratory animal. So most of you probably know this species already. And what's interesting here is that this species has a nervous system that is dramatically simple or easy to explore because it has only 302 neurons. And we know everything about these neurons. They are connected always the same way. So it's not like our 86 billions neurons that are connected differently in each of us. In these worms are connected in all individuals in the same way, and we know everything about their chemical features. Despite all this, by reading the activity of the brain, of the neural structure, we cannot predict behavior. So these are just examples about the issues that reductionism it's facing when dealing with complexity. And the point is that unfortunately, most of the problems, the biomedical problems we are facing nowadays, such as psychiatric disorder, neurodegenerative disorders, and so on, are complex problems. So we need to face a paradigm shift and leave determinism, mechanicism, and reductionism aside and try to embrace complexity. And I will explain first what complexity is, because there is there are different definitions of complexity. It's important that we are aligned on a specific definition. And using the Britannica Encyclopedia, complexity is systems display behavioral phenomena that are completely inexplicable by the conventional analysis of the system constituent parts. So, to use an old say, we can quote Aristotle by saying that the whole is more of the sum of its parts. This is what complexity is for most scientists. And it implies that there's emergence. Emergence is a new phenomenon that is completely inexplicable from the constituent parts. This is what emergence is. And to use a more modern way of defining complexity, we can use the paper of the Nobel Prize Anderson, More is Difference, published in Science in the 70s. But how to deal with such complexity? And I will present nowadays my own perspective, and this perspective applies to all kinds of complex systems. You see, this does not apply to non-complex systems, and many issues we are facing nowadays are still non-complex systems. So from now on, I will talk only about what applies to complex systems where the whole is more of the sum of its parts. And in order to describe my own approach to complexity, I will use a metaphor of the brain that is highly complex. But when I refer to the brain, I always refer to the entire organism. This is because we have always to keep in mind that behavior emerges from the entire organism and not from the brain only. So, metaphors of the brain. There are multiple metaphors that goes with the technological progress of the time. So in the 17th century, the brain was considered as a watch. More recently, it has been hypothesized that the brain works as a digital computer, and this is still the most used metaphor nowadays. The metaphor I would like to present to you today is the brain as a kitchen. And I come out immediately by saying that I chose a kitchen as a metaphor, not because I'm Italian, not because I like to eat and cook, but because I really believe that kitchen grasps the deep functioning of the complexity within the brain, mind, and context interplay. So, what is this metaphor about? The kitchen represents the brain, as we said, and all the ingredients and tools available in the kitchen represents everything we have in the brain. So genes, molecules, neural elements, brain areas, whatever. And then there is the output of the cooking process that overlaps with the output of the neural process, that is the behavior. So the meal represents the behavioral outcome. And there is also a fourth player that is, unfortunately, in neuroscience, very much overlooked, but terribly important, that is the context, the circumstances in which the meal is prepared. And these four elements have specific relationships that define the overall functioning of these four levels of analysis. Today, I will describe you the implications that come from approaching the brain, the mind, and the context from this perspective. So, the first implication that is entailed by this perspective is that the context is the grandmaster. The context defines everything. Why this? This is how this is possible. It's possible, for instance, if we consider that in the kitchen, going on with the kitchen metaphor, we have a given amount of ingredient, but the way the meal will be prepared, so the way we use what we have in our brain to produce a behavioral outcome depends on context. Because if we are with the nice people, dear and nice people, maybe we will go for a fine and elaborate meal. But if we are tired, overwhelmed with work, then maybe even if we have the exact same ingredients in the refrigerator, in the kitchen, we will go for an easy meal. So the context defines the way the neural substrates are organized and the behavior that is produced. And a clear example is the placebo effect. So it's a clear example of the power of the context. The placebo effect is when we receive a pill. Let's consider a pill for treating pain. Then we have an effect. But also, if we receive not a pill, but a sugar candy or something like that, that has no active ingredients in it, but we are told that this pill is highly effective in reducing our pain, then we have an effect that is produced only by context. And this is the placebo effect. And what's interesting is that this does not concern only the psychological level, but also the biological level. It has been shown, for instance, that the treatment for pain and the placebo effect activates the same area in the brain. The second important implication arising from the kitchen metaphor perspective is that the system interface serves as a privileged lever for system orchestration. Now, let's say like this might appear a little bit complicated, but the problem is about who leads and who follows. Are the neural substrates that direct behavioral responses, or behavioral responses direct neural substrates? It's just a bi-directional interaction, or the roles are different here? So let's try to explore the first hypothesis. Do neural substrates direct a behavioral response? And if we go to the kitchen metaphor, it appears immediately clear that this is not the case. Why this? Because the ingredients, according to if you come to my place and go to my kitchen and you check all the ingredients I have in my kitchen, you will not guess what I will cook tonight. The ingredients do not constrain the system to produce a specific, no, let's say the ingredients do not direct the system to produce a specific outcome. Even if you add specific ingredients in my refrigerator, you want to add bacon and eggs to make me cook a carbonara, and you add this to my refrigerator or my kitchen, even if you add these ingredients, I might use them or might not, or I might use them in a different way. And so the ingredients cannot direct behavior. Even if I have only one egg in the refrigerator, this can be cooked in so many different ways. So I have not a clear outcome that matches what the ingredients I have in my brain and the behavioral outcome. So ingredients cannot direct the meal. And this is clear, it's emerging clearer and clearer, because there are multiple studies showing that with the same genetic mutations, for instance, or chromosomal alteration, we can produce a number of different disorders. So this is because with the same ingredients we can produce many different recipes, and this is exactly the idea of the kitchen. And this perspective also invites us in revisiting specificity, because it's clear that ingredients are not specific. And in order to explain that, let's consider a very simple system, such as the system of the muscles in our body. So let's consider the muscles that we use for football. And let's hypothesize, can we identify the football muscle? Is this different from the tennis muscle? No, there is no specificity. The specificity one-to-one from a specific ingredient, a gene, molecule, brain area, and the overall, the general outcome of the system is not possible if this is a complex system. If it's a non-complex system, it is. And again, vaccines or antibiotics are a clear example. But if it's a complex system, any single element has a direct effect on the general outcome. And this is why we have many biomarkers in psychiatry, for instance, but these are contemporary biomarkers. So I can say that people who is depressed have low levels of BDNF, but at the same time. But are there markers that allow us to predict whether an individual will develop a depressive disorder? According to many studies, this is just an example by Claudia Bochting's group. There is none of biomarkers that is prospective in predicting behavior. And approaching the problem from the opposite perspective, even if when we modify a specific gene, a very important gene such as oxytocin that has been advertised as the love gene and so on, it's been studied very much in prairie voles that compared to mountain voles have a specific behavior because they express a high level of oxytocin. So it seems that oxytocin is specific for love. But what happened some years ago, because of the development of new techniques to target genes, not only in mice, but for instance, also in voles, such as CRISPR, it has been shown that if we knock out the oxytocin gene in prairie voles that are the love couple, they behave exactly the same. There is no difference. So we have to reconsider specificity in this perspective. Then let's ask the opposite question. Does behavior direct neural substrates? And this is a central question here in this presentation, because as about recentering neuroscience on behavior, because can behavior direct neural substrates? And so in order to analyze this, let's start between the interaction between brain and life challenges. And yes, there is an interaction, but it's not a direct interaction, because the brain produces a behavioral response that allow me to interact with the context and the life challenges. The life challenges affect my mental states, that affect then my behavior and my brain and so on. So in the interplay between the brain and context, there is the behavior who plays the role of the interface. And the interface is key, because it's the level at which the function is meaningful. Is only at the interface the function of the full organism is fully meaningful. And the interface is a unique system level, because, for instance, if we have neural substrates and we have an environmental challenge, that is a food critic coming to our place to check our ratatouille. Okay, so we produce 2 ratatouilles that are our behavioral responses. And what comes out is that one ratatouille, when coping with the environment, is effective, but the other one is not effective at all. What I want to highlight with this story, I want to highlight that the only thing that matters is the interface. Because even if we have exactly the same neural substrates in order to cook these different ratatouilles, it's the behavior that counts, because behavior it's key in our capability of survive, of our capability of reproduce. So behavior is the interface between us and the environment, so and with coping with the environment, and therefore has a special role. And the role is that it's the only thing that really matters. Is that even if I have very bad neural substrates, but the behavioral response is incredibly effective, This is what counts. So the behavior is key because it's an interface, and it's key because it's the functional outcome of neural processes. But the behavior is so important because not only because of this, but also because the interface, it's also a special role, it's a privileged level for control. The interface, that is behavior, organizes the entire structure of the system. It means that behavior organizes the entire structure of the brain. How this is possible? In order to understand this, we have to introduce the concept of top-down causation, downward causation. And I will use the example of the work done by Gerhard Fankhauser. Gerhard Fankhauser was a Swiss embryologist who went to Princeton, and he was very interested in this species, Triturus virescens. And he was interested in this species because this species goes through spontaneous polyploidy. It means that, you know that most mammal species, including ourselves, have just 2 copies of our genome. But these animals can develop multiple copies, so 3 copies, 4 copies, and so on. But he was not interested in the number of copies, not in the genetic factor, but he was interested in the fact that polyploid cells are much larger than diploid cells. So his question was, the individual is built in the same way if we use brick this size, or if we use bricks that are double in size. Is the structure of individual identical? In order to investigate this, he focused on the kidney of this animal, in particular on the section of the ducts of the protonephric structure of this larva that are the proto-kidney of these animals. And the first hypothesis was, okay, if we have cell this size, bricks this size, we will build a section this size. If we have bricks much larger, that are much larger, then we will build a much larger section here. But the truth was, what he found was that this was not the case, but independently from the size of the bricks of the cells, the section of the duct was always the same, even just a single cells to produce the same duct. Why this? Because the section is the functional level, is the only thing that matters, as we said earlier. And it's because only with this section the kidney works for capillarity, permeability, and so on. So everything has to be organized according to this. And it's not because we have large bricks then we have large sections. So the function drives the organization at a lower scale. To provide you an example, if we have a house built like this because we have bricks this size, if we have bricks that are double in size, we do not build a house that is so large, because it would have the handle of the door at 2 meters. It would be totally functionless. What we should do is to reorganize the use of our brick that are double in size in order to have a functional house. So is the function that drives, and therefore there is a downward causation. And it's interesting to remember that Albert Einstein, who was a colleague of Fankhauser in Princeton, wrote him a letter stating that most peculiar, however, for me is the fact that in spite of the large single cell, the size of the animal is not correspondingly increased. It looks as if the importance of the cell as a ruling element of the whole had been overestimated previously. So is through downward causation that the behavioral response organize neural substrates. As I'm speaking now, I'm enroll a specific area of my brain, and therefore that enables me to speak. It's not my brain that tells me to speak. It's because I'm speaking, I enroll the right neural substrates that I need for speaking. So there is a top-down, downward causation in play here. This is why I published this paper in 2022 titled Recentering Neuroscience and Behavior. The interface between the brain and environment, that is the behavior, is a privileged level of control of neural activity. So, and this is based on the concept of the interface. This is because the behavior is the interface. And this concept can be generalized. The interface is when we have a whole system that interacts with the outer world, then we have the interface. So we can have an interface of the brain itself that interacts with the rest of the body, the interface of a neuron that interacts with all the other neurons, the interface of an ecosystem that interacts with the rest of the other ecosystem, and the interface of the organism that we have just described. So the concept of interface can be applied in a broad perspective. The third implication that I would like to discuss, it's the one about the different role played by the ingredients, what is inside a system, and the circumstances, the context, that is what is outside a system. So what we have, our dopamine, serotonin, whatever we have in the brain, plays a different role in defining our behavior and mental states compared to what occurs out of me, such as someone entering in the room now. In order to understand this concept, I have to introduce the concept of causality, or my perspective of the concept of causality in complexity science. Because when we talk about causal relationship in neuroscience and biological psychiatry, we mainly focus on what can be named instructive causality. We have an event that produces an outcome, and the outcome is shaped by the event through the transfer of information or energy. And a telling example are billiard balls. We have a first ball hitting a second ball, and the way the second ball changes its behavior is because of the features of the first ball, the speed, the weight, the angle, and so on. But there is also another type of causality in when we talk about the brain and the mind, that it's at least equally relevant but much more overlooked. And this causality is the permissive causality. In this case, an event does not directly produce an outcome, but increase or decrease the likelihood of another event to produce an outcome. And in order to understand this other type of causality, the telling example here are the doors. So you are in a room now, and the door probably is unlocked. And because it is unlocked, you can go out if you want, or if you need. Let's say someone is asking you to go out. But it's not because the door is unlocked or the door is open that you go out. You can go out, you are enabled to go out, but it's not because of this that you go out. You need a reason to go out that is different from the fact that the door is open. And what I would like to propose you in light of the kitchen metaphor is that only contextual factors can act through instructive causality, and substrates, neural substrate, everything I have inside myself can act only through permissive causality. So context can act through permissive and instructive causality, and substrates only through permissive causality. And in order to provide you with an example, the question is why I am speaking now. I'm speaking, I can answer in two ways to this question. I'm speaking now because you are listening to my presentation, and you are something that are outside of me. You are my context in this moment, and you instruct me in talking. So you have an instructive power on me. But I can answer to the question why I'm talking now also with a different answer. That is, I'm talking because I have a brain. I have a Broca area in my brain. But this is not the reason why I'm talking. This is the reason why I'm enabled to talk. I'm enabled to talk because I have a brain. With no brain, no talking. This is clear. But it's not because I have a brain, I'm talking now. It's if I would talk the same way without any context that it's instructing me to talk, then it would be weird, it would be psychopathology. So what is important here is that the context has an instructive power in determining behavior, and some traits have a permissive power in determining complex behavior. Let's always remember that we are not talking about not complex problem, but we are talking about complex problems, such as complex behavioral responses. So how to provide a more applied perspective here? We are exploring this idea since a long time. This is a paper appeared in 2011 about plasticity, and plasticity is in a way a clear manifestation of permissive causality. And what I want to show you, what I want to demonstrate to you here is that the drug that are the ingredients, because the drugs that we use, for instance, for treating depression are something that goes inside and therefore become part of the ingredients in the kitchen we have. And they act through permissive causality, and therefore they enable change. By contrast, context is key in driving change through instructive causality. I will describe the experiment done by Aurelia Miglione during her PhD in our team. She is now a young researcher in the team, and she analyzed this important clinical data set on depression provided by NIH. We had information about 4,000 patients with major depressive disorder. We had information about the depressive score at different time points, 0 to 4, 6, 9, 12 weeks. And we had information about context, socioeconomic status, and the different persons, the different patients received different dose regimens. All were treated with a dose of citalopram. And the idea is that the drug operates through permissive causality, while the context operates through instructive causality. And in this schematic representation, we have the patient that is represented by this square, and the mood of the patient is represented by the color inside the square. And if we have the context coming in two different flavors in a very rough way, adverse or favorable, if we have a patient exposed to an adverse environment, their mood will be affected by the adverse environment. The same for a favorable environment. But we said that drug operates through permissive causality. So giving a drug increase the enabled effects of the environment. So if we give a drug such as SSRI, we have a higher match between the mood inside of the patients, that is the color inside the square, and the color outside the square, that is the context. But this is not in one direction. The direction is provided by the context. So in an adverse environment, it's a worsening of mood, and in a favorable context, it's an improvement of mood. And if we have different dosages, we expect that this permissive action is higher with higher dosages. And in order to make a long story short, this is the correlation that Aurelia found. And On the y-axis, we have the match between the patient's living environment and mood, so how much the mood is affected by the environment. And on the x-axis, we have the dosage. And you can see that we found a striking correlation between the two. This means that in line with our hypothesis, the drug exerts a permissive causal role by enabling the context to exert an instructive effect on mood. It means that the drugs enables the change, but the direction of the change is determined by context. And what is interesting is that this drug by context interplays emerging as a common mechanism in psychopharmacology. This has been shown by us and others with SSRIs, but also with novel potential antidepressants such as psychedelics. But what I want to highlight is that it's not only about depression. For instance, in the treatment for autism, it has been shown that oxytocin is effective only if paired with a controlled context. If it's paired with an uncontrolled context, its effectiveness is much reduced. And very recently appeared a paper in JAMA Psychiatry showing this is about oxytocin and wound healing. And the wound healing is accelerated by oxytocin. But what's interesting here is that this effect of acceleration provided by oxytocin is much amplified by context. In particular, wound healing is accelerated if the individuals received oxytocin and also had intimate and sexual relationships. Without intimate and sexual relationships, the effect of oxytocin on wound healing was much limited. So there is an increasing number of data showing that there is a drug by context interplay and is a permissive by instructive interplay. So summarizing this, we have that context drive as a role in driving behavioral and mental states, and this is achieved through instructive causality, and therefore the context indicates which behavioral mental state to display. By contrast, genetic, molecular, and neural elements constrain behavioral and mental system. And this is done by permissive causality. And because genetic, molecular, and neural elements define which behavioral mental state can be afforded. Using the kitchen metaphor again, if you come to my place and watch what I have in my kitchen, you cannot guess what I will cook tonight. If you see eggs, whatever, all the ingredients you can imagine, you cannot guess what I will cook. But you can easily guess what I will not cook. Because if there are no eggs in my kitchen, I cannot cook any recipe that implies eggs. So this is why genetic, molecular, and neural elements constrain behavior and mental states. So both context and substrates are determinants, but they have antithetical but synergic roles. This means that when we deal with the gene by environment interaction, the two factors, the genes and the environment, have not the same role. Genes are enablers. Environment is the driver. So this is what I propose you to interpret this gene by environment interaction. So this conceptual framework is named the context theory of constraint system. And I have published in recent years a number of papers describing this idea. And all these papers are based on the idea that permissive and instructive causality should be considered in order to understand how the brain, the mind, and context interplay. And this is a way of integrating biological and environmental factors in mental health. So the take-home messages here are that, and let's remember that these take-home messages applies when we deal with a complex problem and not with a non-complex one. But when we tackle a complex problem, we have to consider first that nowadays complexity is something that we should tackle, because in many cases I heard people saying, "Oh, this is complex. We cannot deal with it." No, now we have more and more tools in order to tackle complexity and better understand mental health and how the brain functions. Second point is that the context that is the subject experience of the environment. So it's not only the environment we are experiencing now, but also it's also associated to my personal history. So if in this environment I had a specific experience in the past, then I will interpret this environment in my own perspective and so on. So context, that is a subjective experience of the environment, and neural substrates play different roles, though they are synergic in defining what is behavior, what are the behaviors and the mental states we will display. Contextual factors should be always considered, and this is key in psychiatry and neuroscience, because many experiments are done without considering contextual factors, but they are so important because they are the only one who act through instructive causality. Then, when we target biological substrates, we have to remember that they act through permissive causality. So, if we deal with a complex system, they are enabler. They are not directors. Finally, that the interface controls the system. So, behavioral mental states are not just a passive output of brain functioning. They orchestrate the brain functioning. And therefore, if we act on behavior, we also consequently reorganize brain functioning. And this can be a way to implement therapeutic strategies. And the last point, that is just a note of caution, it's about SSRIs. I talked about SSRIs, they amplify the effect of the environment, but I do not provide here any medical advice on how to use SSRIs. They are key to treat mental illness. So please don't misinterpret me. I don't provide you about any specifics on how to use medications, as I am not MD, I'm a basic scientist. Finally, just to show you how it's unpredictable what can come out and what are the permissive and instructive factors, I show you this short video. And now the milk will be placed in this container, and you will see which behavior will emerge. And this is totally unexpected. So this is a clear example of emergence, because it's something that emerges only when you have all the factors together. And this emerges because each dog tries to push the other dog out of the milk in the same direction, and therefore they start circling like a galaxy. And finally, I want to mention the people with whom I'm collaborating, and particularly people from my team, Silvia Poggini, Aurelia Miglione, Claudia Licolli, and Giulia Petruccioli, and all the others. And I thank you very much for your attention.